Hey guys, if you didn't have a chance to join us live in the 10 stupidest mistakes men make when facing divorce and how to avoid them, we put together some highlights for you in a recorded video. Take a look, hope you get a lot out of it. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the 10 stupidest mistakes men make when facing divorce and hopefully give you some ideas, tips, and tricks on how to avoid them. Brought to you by Cordell Cordell. So today, we often do these seminars in the evening where we have a couple of hours to spend time with guys, answer some questions and get into more detail, but today we'll kind of be in the ultra fast hyper mode within 45 to 60 minutes, hopefully leave some time at the end. You'll have an opportunity to post some questions in the chat box. If we do have some time, we'll try to get to them. But keep in mind that we can't give you any legal advice today. We'll just try to give you some general information. It really is a chance to educate you, to give you some of the tips and some of the mistakes I see that generally aren't necessarily legal, but they're more factual and experiential. In 25 plus years that I've been doing this, I have some of those, and we can go through those today. I'll give you a little bit of intro about Cordell Cordell as well. Introduce myself. I'm Scott Trout, the CEO and managing partner of Cordell Cordell. Keep in mind, I'm licensed in Missouri, Illinois, and Georgia. But again, I won't be giving you any advice today, but I want to give you as much high-level information as we can because that really is the key for guys facing divorce. It's about education. It's about equipping yourself and making sure you're prepared. Let me tell you about Cordell Cordell again. You can go to our website at mensdivorce.com, cordellcordell.com to get further information on some of these mistakes. So the first thing that I usually talk about with guys in any initial consultation, it's usually the first question that they ask is, should I move out? What happens if I do? And it wouldn't matter whether or not you have a custody issue or you have property issues or spousal support issues because it affects men both ways. And so let's talk a little bit about the impact with moving out if you choose to do so and whether my recommendation and what it would be. But first and foremost, I'll usually tell guys, don't move out under any circumstance. There are exceptions to that rule. And the exceptions would be domestic violence, issues in which you feel that you have a safety issue. Of course, you're going to move out. If you have children and you can take what I would call the power position, and that is you can move out with your kids, then I would always say do so. But as you're taking notes at home, don't write that down as an absolute. It really is probably the first thing that you want to have a discussion with your attorney or an attorney is, do you move out? And so let's get into some of those issues, even though I say don't. But let's see what the effect would be if you choose to do so or why you should stay. The second mistake I often see guys make is allowing confrontations to occur. And by that I mean, we all know orders of protection, adult abuse orders, issues in where you're baited into a conversation, an ensuing argument that you don't want. But keep in mind, and I always describe the situation as this, and it goes with a couple of the other mistakes. Your wife is no longer sitting next to you. Remember, you got married, you sat at the table, you had all your friends and your family at the wedding perhaps, and you and your wife were on one side of the table together, and everybody else was there. You're no longer sitting on the same side of the table. She's sitting across from you at the opposite side. I mean, assuming you're in the middle of a divorce. It's not that you're making decisions collectively in the best interest of the both of you, perhaps, but that's typically what divorce is. And so keep in mind that anything that you do, these conversations and perhaps ensuing arguments, they're just going to lead to nothing other than perhaps a confrontation. Waiting for your wife to file. So for me, I'll say each one of these are very, very important. But filing first, this is basically what this is a big one for me. Now, keep in mind that from a divorce lawyer's perspective, something you never hear, and I would be shocked if you did, is when you walk in the doors at Cordell, oftentimes you'll see one of our attorneys saying, look, I don't want you to file unless you're absolutely certain that your marriage is irretrievably broken, that it cannot be saved, and that you've made every attempt to do so. It's an odd piece of advice from a divorce lawyer, but we take it seriously, and that is we only want our clients to do it when they're really ready. It's a huge step to do it. And so, but when they are, they do need to be cautious about when they should file. I was just meeting with a gentleman over the weekend, had an emergency, so we had a long discussion. His wife had moved to Texas, picked up about 3 weeks ago, and just left. And he was convinced she's coming back. The facts didn't lean that way, again, emotional. He didn't want to give up on his marriage. And I said, look, you can't wait for her to file. You don't want her to file in a state that you may have no contact with. All right, concealing information from your lawyer. This is one that often I see, and in our evening seminars, I get into a long topic and conversation about this because it's so important when we do it. And I had a conversation many years ago with a friend of mine who's a doctor, and we were talking about the relationship he has with patients compared to the relationship or typically attorneys have with their clients, and they're very interesting. So I try to use in the evening, I try to use examples here so that you can write them down. So I'll call this doctor versus lawyer. And this is the best way to understand concealing information. So imagine that you have a problem with your left leg. And you call your doctor and you say, I'd like to make an appointment. And typically when you call, they say, well, what are you coming in for? And you would say, well, my left leg is hurting. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. You show up at the doctor's office, you walk in, and again, they gather information from you, and then the nurse will come see you and triage. And she says, again, tell me why you're here. Well, never happens that you walk in and you tell a different story to the nurse or to the doctor. And you said, well, I called and it said it was my left leg, but it's actually my right leg. When you know it's really not your right, it's your left. That would never happen. And the reason it would never happen is because you want to be healed of the problem that you're having with your left leg. But the problem and the difference and the distinction between doctors and lawyers is that that happens with lawyers and their clients. All right, moving on. Mistake number 5, doing a sloppy job on financial records. And in our evening seminar, this has a lofty title of insufficient consideration of financial documents. And I say that, but really this one, doing a sloppy job, is probably the best description. So remember the last mistake we called doctor versus lawyer. This one I call the tax return. And in the evening, I'll ask guys, we have 100 guys in the audience, how many of you prepare and file your own tax returns? And I get all these hands. I would say 3/4 of the guys in the room do their own tax returns. So I'm going to ask you the same thing. Think about it. Do you prepare and do your own tax returns? I was just sitting down with my son, and he was doing his own taxes. Because he's younger, he's in his 20s, but the point is he does his own. And the reason I call this a tax return is because of this. All right, neglecting your children, and it's a strong word when we talk about neglect, and I don't mean actual neglect, but what I think it should be, but I do it to get your attention, that is stay involved, especially if you have kids. And that means exercise as much time as you can, because mistakes guys make is they become overwhelmed with the emotional side of the divorce because, their partner, that relationship's ending. And they start focusing perhaps too much on money, too much on property, the negative effects. Sometimes it causes guys to retreat emotionally, psychologically. And so if you have kids, keep in mind, and when we talk about it, mistake number 6 is stay involved. And that is exercise as much time as you can get. Be the nanny. Be the babysitter. I talk about, those are tough words too, but the point is encourage your spouse to go out, encourage her to let you see and watch the kids. And the reason so is because, again, keep in mind, if you moved out, you want to exercise as much as you can. And so what's important is to keep a calendar and to keep a diary. Mistake number 7, I often see is talking too much, period, but especially to your wife. There's a saying that silence is golden. So a lot of guys, I think, mistake this for me to say, I should never speak with my wife. And that's really not what I'm saying is, and then I'll give you the example here. What I'm saying is there's a lot that you shouldn't be sharing. You hire an attorney, you spend a lot of money, because divorce isn't cheap, for an important point, and that is to get a good strategy. And you talk about facts, and you talk about what's going wrong and what's going right with your case. And so you want to make sure that you're not talking too much. Because there are better things that are left unsaid, right? Example. I like to use examples because sometimes just saying talking too much doesn't describe it. So here's the example. 25 years ago, I had a client. He wanted custody, at least equal custody. He moved out, so he'd made a mistake, right? But fortunately, he was able to get pretty much almost exactly equal time, including overnights, over the period of about 12 months during the pendency of the divorce. Interestingly, even though wife was consenting to him to get this period of custody over that time, her position was going to be that he only have one night a week, every other weekend. So we had no choice but to hire an expert, a psychologist who would come in and interview the kids, interview dad, and make a recommendation as to who should have or what type of schedule it should be. Now, when you don't interview all parties, in some states, a psychologist can't make a recommendation, but what they can do is say, I've observed this is what's going on, I've observed the parties, I've observed the kids, I've observed the interaction with dad and the kids are doing extremely well under this current arrangement. And it is my position that any deviation from this schedule would likely have negative psychological ramifications on the kids. And so that's what we had set up, lined up perfectly. Wife did not have an expert. They didn't know we had one until our client allowed mistake number, I think it's 2 or 3, confrontation to occur, and mistake number 7, which is talk too much. All right, number 8, revealing too much on the internet. This is pretty simple and straightforward, and I'm going to ask you all to think about this, and because I ask all my clients, name one time, if you're in the middle of a divorce, name one time that anything you've ever posted on social media, any picture, any video, any comment, any like, anytime you've been tagged, has helped you advance your divorce. Give me one, whether it be custody, money, property, anything in that regard. Tell me what that's helped you do. And usually I sit here, I wait a minute, it's like crickets. Especially in the night when we're doing these seminars, no one can come up with one because it's never happened. I was on Dr. Phil a number of years ago. I was the expert guest for that show on social media. And we threw up a couple of slides, a couple of pictures that said, here's some social media posts. And he said, what do you think these say? And so I, of course, took a picture and twisted it to what I would say would be my client's advantage that likely had nothing to do with their real intent, what was really going on in that photo, or what was really meant in that photo. And that's my point is, anything you post will be used against you. It's like the Miranda right, you have the right to remain silent. If you choose not to remain silent, what you do and say will be used against you in a court of law. You should be thinking that the internet, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram will be used against you in a court of law. All right, number 9. We have about 6 or 7 minutes left before I'm going to leave a little bit of time in the event that you have questions that I can't answer. Usually there's a couple, and I'll try to do the best I can. Failure to engage in your case. By this I mean, again, be involved in the preparation of your case, the strategy there beforehand. What I suggest is doing some of the work. And by that I mean all of this and being engaged hopefully will save you on attorney's fees. It's not cheap. It's very expensive to go through divorce. And so I encourage clients to do some of the work, and that could be collecting some of the evidence, collecting tax returns, getting all your bank statements, your credit card statements, 401k and retirement and pension, getting all those so that why? It avoids us having to subpoena it. Mistake number 10, being ill-prepared for testimony. This is so huge, and I think, again, this is something that I see everywhere I go across the country where attorneys don't spend enough time with their clients getting them ready. I mean, I've had attorneys come in the door when I'm ready for trial, and they were preparing that morning with their client. So I have 3 words for this mistake, and that is prepare in advance. Prepare in advance. Many attorneys fail in this regard. You should be practicing your testimony 2+ weeks in advance. You should be going through kind of a dry run of a trial or a testimonial hearing, a temporary hearing. What am I going to be asked about? We'll go through what is expected to be asked, review exhibits, Those are the documents. They could be bank statements. They could be spreadsheets. It could be something that's important in your case. Not just review them, know them. So that's all of our time. I know we spilled over a little bit. Thank you for attending. Look forward to doing more of these, especially in the podcast. Look for that 4-part series. I'm going to talk about divorce. I'm going to follow that up with some modification series later, probably in March and April. We're going to be doing another one of these live webinars around the country. You can get more information both at our Cordell Cordell website, mensdivorce.com as well. Again, if you have any other questions and you want to find out more information about the firm, information's on the screen. You can schedule an appointment with us. Go online to do that or call us at 404-793-ALL-ZEROS. Appreciate your time today. Good luck out there. Get more information and get with a lawyer to get more educated.